Hi, everybody. A quick pod lecture about the Dogma 95 manifesto. And I realized that this manifesto was written and became sort of culturally significant before a lot of you were even born, but it did usher in a sort of new period in filmmaking. And in some ways, it prefigured the era that we're in now, the digital era, where so many rules are broken every day, have been eliminated. Where the way that Hollywood made movies in the early 1990s doesn't really exist in so many ways any longer. The early 1990s were a great period for indie cinema in Hollywood, films that cost, $1 million to $8 million, films that had sort of B level stars, but still people who could sell a film on video, and that was a huge revenue source for low budget filmmakers or mid range budget filmmakers. So there were art house cinemas that showed these movies all over the country and really all over the world. And then there was a huge revenue stream in video and DVD that just barely exists anymore. You can put a movie on Amazon Prime and make a small fraction of your budget back. It's really not a huge amount of money that can be made from that sort of distribution. The only way to really make money in that kind of filmmaking is to get the pitch in advance, get the money agreed to in advance, get the stars together, and make the film sort of the way that Adam Sandler works now. But the huge market for indie filmmaking has really dried up in so many ways because all of those avenues to profit are gone, and it's really frustrating for indie filmmakers, and it's really frustrating for script writers who are trying to sell pitches, and there's just no market for them, or a very small market for spec scripts. So, anyways, what was the Dogma 95 manifesto? You can see it here. It's kind of pretentious in some ways, but it was so useful because what it did is it said you can shoot a movie using whatever resources you've got. You don't have to spend, tens of thousands, hundreds of $1,000s on sets and props and locations. And you know, it basically took away so many of the aspects of the rules of what a Hollywood or what a real film was. Now, this is obviously before the digital DSLR revolution, which started in about 2011. The cameras were invented in 2009, but they didn't really hit a sort of mainstream tipping point until a few years later. But by 2011, the digital revolution was fully being realized. At the same time, that digital paths of revenue were collapsing, as I said a moment ago. So there's an irony to it. But as you can see from here, there's this sort of attempt at purity in filmmaking. And there were a few really just phenomenally good films that came out of this. This was started by Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg, two Europeans. There were some very good films. There were also some very messy films, but altogether a really spirited film movement. And you can see from the slide here, the summary that I've got of their vow of chastity, that they wanted all natural light, all handheld work, no post production optical effects, that everything had to be achieved by the actors on set. They didn't want to see genre movies, and they wanted the film shot in 35 millimeter film stock. Now, we know now that 35 millimeter stock is excessively expensive and basically inaccessible to all no budget filmmakers. And we also know that with the mirrorless SLR cameras now, say a Sony Alpha 9, you can get an image that's so close to 35 millimeter in its aesthetic that you don't even need film. You don't need to spend those hundreds of thousands of dollars on buying film and getting a film camera and developing. You can do that so much more cheaply now. And so I think if you look at a film like Tangerine, maybe even the Florida Project, films that are shot on phones that are still really well acted, really well directed, they're sort of the outgrowth of Dogma 95, where really well-known directors said, "You know what? It's okay to break all of these old conventions, all of these old rules, the way that Hollywood made movies, and to do it differently." And so what they did is they opened up the world for the rest of us to make films in a different way, and in that way, they were the beginning of the current film revolution that we're all now living through. So look into it. Look at some of the Dogma 95 movies. See if there are things that you enjoy about them. There are some that are really quite enjoyable. And just know that this is a really unique moment in film history.